while back, I took a look at the original Sony 50mm f1.8 and I really liked it. But the thing is, I reviewed it more as a photographer. See, I wasn't really that into video back then. But as time has gone on, I've done more and more video, and I realized it's worth taking another look at this lens. See, when I first started using this lens for video, it was a huge disappointment. I mean, you've got Sony with some of the world's best autofocus cameras, and yet this lens took like 10 minutes just to focus, if it ever focused at all. But that was before the firmware update, so out of curiosity, I decided to give it a try, and man, was I surprised. The firmware update took a lens that was barely usable for video and turned it into one of my favorite lenses for Sony APS-C. See, this is a good example right here. I film alone, and when I first started making these YouTube videos, all I wanted was a setup where I could hit record on the camera, come walk in front of the camera, stand in my place, and just start talking. But I couldn't do that with this lens because it simply didn't focus. You either had to have a person behind the camera focusing manually, or someone constantly half pressing the shutter button just to kind of get it to find the subject. And even then, it would always just sort of drift off to the background. It wasn't very accurate at all. Now, after the firmware update, I mean, I can film a scene like this just fine. I just hit record, I'm standing right here. I mean, I'm filming on an A6000 without a monitor. I don't know what the shot looks like, but I know that I'm in focus and I don't have to worry about it. B-roll is another good example. You know, when I used to film with this lens, I always filmed in manual focus just because autofocus was completely unreliable. Now, I realize it's a matter of subjectivity to begin with, whether you film your B-roll in manual focus or autofocus. The point being is now, after the firmware update, I actually will film a lot of times B-roll just completely autofocus with this lens because it's so good. You know, I wanted to make this video almost like a public service announcement because I started searching and I don't see a whole lot of people talking about the firmware on this lens. Meanwhile, I know a lot of you guys are watching these types of videos because you're interested in buying this lens, and you're going to go out and buy it. It's going to be on the original firmware, and you're going to think, wow, this sucks. This autofocus is completely unusable. Not realizing that all you need is just a simple firmware update. Because here's the thing, this wasn't some minor update that kind of made a few tweaks. This was a major overhaul that made this lens go from being sort of unusable for autofocus in video to genuinely good for autofocus in video. You know, after I updated the firmware on this lens, it actually felt like I got a brand new lens for free. I mean, that's how big of a transformation it was. So yeah, I mean, if you're buying this lens, or if you already own this lens and you're having trouble with the autofocus, make sure you're on this firmware right here. Anyway, I think that's all I've got for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.